The night was already tense when the hospital doors burst open. The sliding glass parted with a sharp hiss, letting in the cold sting of rain and the metallic scent of blood. A gurney rushed past the waiting patients, wheels squealing, the figure upon it wrapped in a navy uniform torn open at the side. The fabric was slick with crimson, the glint of a badge catching light beneath the harsh fluorescent glow. A police officer, carried fast by paramedics, chest rising shallow, eyes glazed but open. The whole emergency department shifted its rhythm at once. What had been a hum of routine chaos sharpened into a drill of urgency. The trauma bay doors flung wide, staff shouting clipped commands, nurses snapping gloves over trembling hands, instruments rattling into trays. The officer's utility belt clinked as it was stripped away, holstered weapon placed under lock, radio buzzing faint fragments of chatter from his precinct. Officer down, still echoed faintly through the static. His boots, scuffed and wet from the storm, were dragged from his feet, leaving a trail of mud and blood across polished linoleum. His uniform shirt was cut away with shears, exposing the entry wound, a deep, dark crater just under the ribs, already leaking too much for anyone's comfort. Doctors pressed gauze pads tight, blood soaking them faster than they could swap in fresh ones. Monitors screamed with unstable rhythms, beeping erratic alarms. Oxygen hissed from the mask secured over his mouth. The officer's face was pale, lips tinted blue, his jaw clenched against pain but twitching as consciousness flickered. He tried to move his arm, to reach for something, maybe the holster that was no longer at his side, maybe for reassurance, but a nurse pinned it gently, whispering for him to stay still. He blinked heavily, unable to focus, vision blurring in the stark fluorescent wash. Behind the trauma bay curtain, the world outside kept on moving. The waiting room murmured in confusion, whispers about gunshots, about what happened, about why an armed man in uniform had been rushed past them with such haste. In the ambulance bay, another cruiser screeched to a halt, tires kicking water from the asphalt. Fellow officers stormed inside, uniforms soaked, eyes frantic. Their radios still barked out the call, but their focus was here, at the curtained bay where life and death were hanging by a thread. "Back up! Give them room!" a charge nurse snapped, holding the line as uniforms pressed close. The air grew thick with adrenaline. No one wanted to leave, but none of them dared interfere. They could only watch the shadows moving inside the curtain, hear the clipped commands of doctors trying to slow the hemorrhage. The officer had gone down during a domestic call gone wrong. One of them muttered. "Ambush," another whispered. He'd taken the bullet protecting a civilian trying to flee. Their words clung heavy to the walls as the rain pounded outside. Inside, the scene was surgical warfare. 4 lines were shoved into veins, plasma bags hoisted high, clear fluid rushing fast. A chest tube was prepared as the monitors dipped again, showing erratic rhythms that warned of imminent collapse. Compressors leaned in with ultrasound wands, searching the cavity for hidden bleeds, while suction roared to clear the pooling blood. Every second stretched thin, but the team moved with relentless precision, hands steady even as sweat beaded across brows. The officer's breaths rasped shallow, chest rising and falling with fragile effort. The bullet had torn through muscle, nicked bone, and found a place deep where it shouldn't have reached. A place where every heartbeat threatened to drown him from within. "Prep the OR," the lead surgeon ordered. Now. The gurney jolted as wheels locked and unlocked, brakes snapping, monitors traveling with him in a flurry of cords and tubes. A sterile drape was thrown over his body, the bloody uniform shirt left crumpled in a biohazard bin, badge set aside on a tray like an artifact. The officer's eyes rolled half shut, consciousness slipping further as sedatives eased him into surgical sleep. His last coherent glance caught the blur of his brothers in blue just beyond the curtain, their faces rigid, hands curled into fists. Then his lids sank, and machines breathed for him as he was rushed down the hall. The operating theater swallowed him whole. Bright lamps beamed down, gleaming off steel trays loaded with clamps, retractors, sutures. Scrubbed hands poised above the wound, voices muttering calculations, debating entry points. Incisions were made with swift precision, blood spattering, suction whirring to clear pathways. The wound was deeper than initial scans suggested. The bullet had shredded through muscle and torn a vessel, flooding his abdominal cavity. Surgeons worked fast, clamping, cauterizing, patching vessels as alarms shrieked with every dip in pressure. His heart faltered once, twice, forcing compressions right there on the table, ribs snapping under the force, until rhythm returned, fragile but steady. The minutes stretched into hours, storm still raging outside. His fellow officers waited in the corridor, pacing, heads in hands. Radios quiet now except for the occasional update from the field. The hospital halls smelled of bleach and iron, every surface humming with tension. Nurses carried blood bags 2 at a time, runners sprinting from supply to OR. Custodians wiped streaks of crimson from the floor where the gurney had rushed by, their mops trembling though they tried to remain steady. Every person in the building felt the weight of the uniform on that table, the cost of the badge, the violence that had spilled through their doors. When the bullet was finally removed, clattering into a stainless steel basin, silence fell across the room for a heartbeat. The slug was flattened on one side, deformed by bone, stained dark. The lead surgeon didn't linger on it. He passed it off to a nurse for bagging and tagged it for evidence. Then sutures went in, vessels tied, layers closed. The work wasn't finished. The officer had lost too much blood, his body still unstable. But for now, the tide had been stemmed. Machines continued to breathe for him, IVs pumping steady streams, lines coiled like lifelines tethering him to the present. Recovery was the next battlefield. He was wheeled into ICU, swarmed again by staff checking vitals, adjusting drips, taping lines in place. His body was pale against the hospital sheets, bandages stark white across his torso. His badge and nameplate were set gently on the bedside table, polished though still flecked with dried blood. In the hallway beyond the glass, his precinct brothers stood watch, faces drawn, refusing to leave even as hours crept toward dawn. They rotated shifts quietly, some making calls to his family, others holding silence like prayer. Morning light leaked into the ICU through high, narrow windows. The storm had broken, leaving puddles across the asphalt of the ambulance bay. The officer's breathing eased beneath the ventilator's rhythm, his heart finding steadier ground with each passing hour. Nurses adjusted drips, checked sutures, and recorded vitals in hushed tones. Doctors stopped in for rounds, their faces lined with exhaustion but carrying the satisfaction of survival. At least for now. The fight wasn't over, but the worst had been endured. His family arrived late that morning, escorted by officers in plain clothes. A woman with weary eyes and trembling hands pressed against the ICU glass, straining for a glimpse of the man inside. Children clutched her sleeves, their faces pressed close, eyes wide at the sight of tubes and machines. When visitation allowed, she stepped in, standing at his bedside, her hand finding his beneath the web of IVs. She whispered words only he could hear, her voice quivering but strong. His fingers twitched faintly, an answer from somewhere deep inside sedation. That was enough for her. Tears broke loose, but she clung tighter. The precinct sent more than just visitors. They sent food trays, coffee runs, messages of solidarity pinned to the ICU bulletin board. The waiting room was filled with uniforms at all hours, a rotating vigil. Some spoke in hushed tones about the shooting, about the ambush, about the man who pulled the trigger and the justice still waiting. Others kept silent, staring at their boots, carrying the weight of what could have been any one of them. The hospital itself seemed transformed into an extension of their station, every hallway echoing with their presence. As hours turned into days, the officer's condition stabilized. The tubes began to come out one by one, the ventilator first, leaving him gasping but breathing on his own. Then the chest tube, leaving a stitched scar across his side. His eyes fluttered open for longer stretches, focusing, finding the faces of his loved ones and his brothers outside the glass. His voice came back hoarse, barely more than a whisper, but his first words were simple. "Is everyone safe?" The answer was yes, though not without cost. And in his fragile smile, even through pain, was the quiet pride of duty fulfilled. Recovery stretched on, painful and slow. Physical therapy sessions tested his endurance, each movement a war against scar tissue and weakness. Nurses encouraged, therapists guided, officers waited in the halls to walk with him as he relearned his steps. The shepherd's crook of his arm bore the memory of compressions, the ache of healing ribs. But every day he pushed forward. Every day another line was pulled, another bandage changed, another step taken. The hospital became both battlefield and sanctuary, a place where pain met persistence. By the time he was cleared for discharge, weeks had passed. His uniform, cleaned and pressed, was brought to him by fellow officers. He didn't wear it out, not yet, but he touched the badge with reverence, holding it against the bandages that still covered his torso. As he was wheeled out beneath the hospital's awning, the morning sun casting golden light across the lot, a line of officers stood waiting. Their salutes rose in unison, a silent vow, a testament to survival. The officer lifted his chin, his body still weak, but his spirit unbroken. He left the hospital scarred, but alive. And for those who had carried him through the night of storm and steel, the memory of that arrival, the blood, the rush, the fight, would remain forever etched in the sterile halls where a life had been clawed back from the brink.